Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre this Wednesday night on a day that has seen fresh controversy break out on relations between the government and the army. Tonight, is there a deep distrust between the civil and military establishment, and if so, how can it be repaired? Also, as India comes under fire for its foreign policy, from the way Tibetan protests were crushed recently to lukewarm support to Burma's democracy movement, should India be realistic or principled when it comes to dealing with the world? Those are our big debates tonight. I'm Nidhi Razdan. These are the headlines. The Prime Minister describes as alarmist the Indian Express story which claims the government was alarmed over an unnotified troop movement towards Delhi in January. The PM says the dignity of the Army Chief's post must not be lowered. The US State Department says the $10 million bounty on Hafiz Saeed was primarily due to his key role in the 26/11 attacks, rejecting the theory that it had anything to do with his opposition to the reopening of the crucial NATO supply route to Afghanistan. The US also refutes Pakistani claims that Islamabad was not informed about the bounty, says Washington was in communication with Pakistan on the issue. After 20 years, India re-enters the nuclear-powered submarine space. Defence Minister Antony commissions a Russian-built nuclear sub in Visakhapatnam. It's been leased by the Indian Navy for the next 10 years. In Delhi, the doctor couple who allegedly left their 13-year-old maid locked up and starving in the house while they vacationed in Thailand are arrested. Sanjay Verma and his wife Sumita had returned to the country a day after the incident was reported in the media, but they were hiding and then arrested today from near a mall in West Delhi. And the Supreme Court upholds the Bombay High Court order asking filmmaker Subhash Ghai to hand over the land allotted to his film institute. The top court says the state government gave the land to the blue-eyed boy at the behest of then Chief Minister Vilas Rao Deshmukh. Well, our top story tonight, it is a story that has created a storm and a sensation in the national capital and much controversy. The Indian Express front page piece which claims that alarm bells rang at the highest levels of government over an unnotified troop movement towards Delhi in January. Reacting to that story today, the Prime Minister called it alarmist. Speaking to reporters in Delhi, he said that the Army Chief is an exalted office and that everyone has an obligation not to lower the dignity of that post. The Prime Minister also said that it is an alarmist report, and he went on to say that the Indian Express story should not be taken at face value.
Army has already explained this. It's a usual, natural activities. Nothing unusual. And we are absolutely confident about the patriotism of our Indian armed forces. Don't question their patriotism. They will not do anything undermining the Indian democracy. They are true patriots. Don't question the patriotism of soldiers who are dying for the country at younger age in the frontiers. I am proud of Indian Army. I am proud of Indian Navy. I am proud of Indian Air Force.
Well, joining us first on Left, Right and Centre tonight is the Editor-in-Chief of the Indian Express, Mr. Shekhar Gupta, who is on the phone line with us now. Mr. Gupta, you've seen the reactions to your story, on which your byline was prominently displayed as well. The Prime Minister's comments have come in. Now, the Indian Express has issued a statement a little while earlier saying that you stand by your story. But when you look back in hindsight, do you think that there was a problem in the way that it was displayed on the front page? The fact that it was the entire front page that took up the story, your byline was there, the words alarm bells were used in the headline. There has been some criticism of the way it was displayed rather than the merits of the story itself.
Well, I'd say I'm rather amused and also intrigued that much of the criticism has been about the style rather than the substance. It's a story that definitely, any newspaper would have had it on page one prominently, full page or not in the newsroom call. Any news channel would have had it as a lead. If I edited any newspaper or any news channel, one would have loved to have this story. So I don't think there's an issue with that. I'm also surprised that a lot of the criticism has come from fellow journalists, which is sometimes understandable. But odd. But having said that, there is no denial of the basic facts of the story. If you look at the Prime Minister's office statement also, it talks about story being alarmist. So the facts are there. Prime Minister's office may think that the conclusions from those facts that we have drawn are alarmist. But we surely stand by the facts and substance of the story. And the rest is a newsroom call.
So you don't see the Prime Minister's comments or the Defence Minister's comments today as a denial of the story. As you yourself said, the Prime Minister called it alarmist but didn't deny it.
Yes, I haven't seen anybody deny the facts. And if anybody calls any facts into question, like any editor of any publication or news channel, we'll be willing to stand up and be willing to check our facts out or look at any new facts that are put up to us. Nothing has been put up to us. But frankly, what else did we expect? I mean, did we expect the government to say this is so correct and how we wish this had not happened, or that, please tell us what to do about this? I mean, this is what we journalists do all the time, all our lives. Our lives are built around great scoops, and all great scoops are denied. I mean, if you go back to the history of all the president's men, and I would comment to anybody without any of this who get worried about routine denials, to please read the book All the President's Men, where in the evening when the story is written, the reporters go home leaving it black, leaving a blank saying insert denial. So denials, as long as there are governments in the world, there will be denials.
Right, but let me ask you one final question, which is on the general criticism, again in the commentary today, which has been that when one reads the story, there are some people who get the impression that while you don't use the C word, coup, that somehow the story implies that. How do you respond to that?
Well, we cannot get into people's minds. We cannot tell people what conclusions to draw. But I think if you see how the story is written, and certainly I take responsibility because I've written it, it is absolutely emphatically clear. It's a story about mistrust and a broken down communication. It's not a story about a coup attempt. There is no suggestion of a coup attempt. In fact, if you see, there are several lines there which clearly say that there's a line that says that while there was all the other concerns, etc., 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 nobody uses coup word to imply anything other than curious, right? But it was curious, it was odd, it was a story. But if people don't read, they draw their own conclusions, they jump with it, what can one do about it?
All right, Mr. Shekhar Gupta, the editor-in-chief of the Indian Express, standing by your story there, and the facts that you say are in your story. The Indian Express is also in its official statement.
If I can have half a minute more, let me say something else. It's not a question about what exactly was somebody's intent that night, or the denials, or part denials. The basic issue remains. The basic issue remains that there is a breakdown of trust and communication between the military, between the army specifically and the government. The two of them cannot stand on two different sides of a grave divide and keep praising each other, right? That doesn't help. They have to communicate and they have to settle some of these issues so that they can actually talk in one voice instead of having all these cracks show up and then respond by praising each other. This is being escapist. That's our editorial view.
All right, Mr. Shekhar Gupta, thanks very much for giving us your point of view there. And as Shekhar Gupta was saying, that perhaps more than the merits of the story itself, the controversy has further reinforced a growing belief of this growing military-government divide and whether their relations are at an all-time low. Sandeep Phukar now joins me for some perspective on how the government has looked at this latest controversy. Sandeep, at the heart of this, it's not just about one story that's appeared in the newspaper today. It's really about a series of things that have happened in the last few months that leads one to believe that there is this huge divide.
That's right. I think, as Shekhar pointed out, I think some very key points in Shekhar's, comment, that first of all, there's actually no denial. What the government has done is that they are trying to, if there is one, it is actually a denial about the possible inferences that have been made, largely by fellow journalists who've read or people in the media. So the government's actually tried to deny the fact that, yes, there was a troop movement, yes, it may not have been notified, yes, it is not the protocol, but it doesn't lead up to the C word that you were referring to. That's what the government is trying to deny. They are trying to say that, the delicate balance of power that exists between civilian authorities and the army, armed forces continues to exist. That's the intent of the government. Whether or not they have been able to convince the people, I think that's another story.
Right.
But this morning, we did ask this question to the Prime Minister. I happened to cover that Padma Award ceremony, investiture ceremony. And as is the convention that he speaks to reporters after the ceremony gets over, I actually asked this question. My first question to the Prime Minister was on the Express report. He said that the report is somewhat alarmist and should not be taken at face value. And he said the Defence Ministry has already issued a statement on that. On the issue of this, growing tension or friction between the two parts of the government, army and the government, he said that Army Chief's position is an exalted office and nothing should be done to lower its dignity. That's how the government is trying to play it down.
All right, Sandeep, thanks very much for that perspective. So the question we're asking on our first big debate tonight is whether there is a deep distrust between the civil and the military establishment in this country, or whether those concerns are exaggerated. Do tell us what you think. You can write to us at those addresses there on your screen. You can tweet to us and email us as well. Well, joining us on the program tonight, well-known defense analyst Lieutenant General Shankar Prasad is with us. We have Major General Ravi Arora, the editor of the Indian Military Review. We have Ambassador K.C. Singh, who's been talking about this issue extensively. Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, the chief spokesperson of the BJP, the principal opposition party, and columnist and author Tavleen Singh, as well as Rahul Bedi, the correspondent with Jane's Defense Weekly. General Shankar Prasad, let me first ask you your thoughts on this story today.
Well, you've been raising this issue about trust deficit. This trust deficit word seems to have become a buzzword today and is creating a lot of confusion. Let me put the whole thing in perspective. While there have always been differences in a manner in which a situation is understood by the Armed Forces Headquarters and the bureaucracy in the Ministry of Defense, this trust deficit word is going beyond a limit now. I would like to say that there have been differences of opinion. There have been many issues concerning equipment procurement, concerning modernization, concerning promotions and many other issues, that there has been differences of opinion, and we have now started talking about a trust deficit. Even I've been talking about a trust deficit. But this trust deficit today needs to be attacked in its totality. While the trust deficit I do not wish to use anymore, maybe minuscule, it is being enlarged as if to look as a big gap.
So you think it's
Such
exaggerated?
a thing does not exist.
You think it's exaggerated?
It is
that it's more
exaggerated. Now I just want to complete this.
Yeah.
Nidhi, I want to complete this. Why has this happened? Why has this happened is simply because some months ago there has been a conflict of a personal nature between the Chief of the Army Staff, General V.K. Singh, and the government relating to the age issue. Throughout these last many months, we have said that the Chief of the Army Staff, at best, should not have taken it up in a manner in which it did and went up to the court. If this incident had not happened, let me assure you, General V.K. Singh would have turned out as one of the finest army chiefs. He has done this nation proud in every other field. He has worked hard towards modernization. He has succeeded somewhat, not succeeded somewhat. He's written a letter to the Prime Minister. He's tried to cleanse the army. He's tried to do so many other things that I don't want to go on narrating on this channel. But the only thing which has been highlighted, and which is as a result of which this trust deficit issue has taken such a magnifying proportion, is because of his age issue. That is why we say of people in such high offices should not take any personal matters, as that creates a different perception. If this had not happened, none of these things would have come to the fore.
So you think it's more of a
You think
it's more of a perception problem rather than a real problem. But
sorry, as far as this particular incident is concerned, Nidhi, it's absolutely bizarre. How can ever an army unit move towards Delhi without a particular objective? This has been simply a mobilization exercise of a very minuscule, of a unit level. Don't forget there are enough units sitting in Delhi. If someone had any evil intentions, those units could have been used. Therefore, please let us not do this. Such are the activities that actually affect the morale. Many other things that have been attributed to affecting morale do not affect the morale of the armed forces. But when we fight in Siachen, when we fight in Kashmir, when we fight insurgency all over, train paramilitary forces to fight the Maoists, and do all the good work throughout the year, and now today you talk about an army doing such activity which is anti-government, I think it's very unfair. It's very unfair for a person like Shekhar Gupta to put it on the front page of Indian Express and let the whole world talk about it. Please, we are not benefiting out of it. The only fellow benefiting out of it is our enemy.
Okay, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, though the BJP today did express concern at this civil-military divide, do you feel today that General Shankar Prasad thinks it's perhaps exaggerated and over-magnified, probably by the media, but do you think it's a real concern right now?
Well, Nidhi, I must make my point very clear. We take and accept with assurance the explanation given by the government in the Ministry of Defence, and also the Prime Minister, who has for the first time spoken a little. He need to speak more and become more active. Army is one of the most important institutions of the country. It secures us by sacrifice, the only institution. And we need to trust the professionalism and dedication of the armed forces who work under political civilian control. That's how we have seen the country grow. Now, yes, Nidhi, you are right. There is a problem with the equilibrium between the current political leadership and the army leadership. That ought to have been set right regardless of the age controversy. There are many other areas. Now, let me give you a very specific instance. The army chief wrote a letter. Next day we saw it was leaked from the army chief office, or as the case may be. Then the IB inquiry was there, it dispelled the entire thing. All these are symptoms of trust deficit. Therefore, I always say, army is indeed a very important institution of the country. And I totally agree with Shankar Prasad ji, as he stated, that we need to trust our army. Differences would be there. I would see it, Nidhi, as a clear case of failure of statecraft. UPA has been a series of cases of failure. Now, even the armed forces should become a victim of that. Is deeply regrettable. It is a case of governance deficit, if I can use that expression, more, which ought to be set right, where we expect the Prime Minister, for heaven's sake, play a more proactive role.
Rahul Bedi, how deep do you think this distrust is between the two sides? Do you think General VP Malik was on this program last week? He thinks it's reached an all-time low. Do you share that assessment, or do you also believe it's exaggerated?
Well, firstly, I would say that the justification offered by the editor of the Indian Express, what I would call what passes for a credible platform, was a little unconvincing and wobbly. Secondly, I think you would like your viewers to know that this very same story as a news story was reported by one of the internet news portals, in fact, on the 16th or 17th of January, the day after it happened, like it should have been as a news story. Thirdly, I think this is a little mischievous to join the dots and to make such a big issue out of it, because it was really a genuine exercise that was carried out by these two units wanting to try and be mobile in the event of a situation like what happened in the Maldives or even what happened in Mumbai. So there's nothing alarming about it, and I think one and one were put together to make four. To answer your question as to whether the trust between the military and the army and the ministry has broken down and the government has broken down, yes, I think without being emotional like the general or politicizing the issue like the politician on the panel, I think yes, the things have become bad, and I think the new chief that comes in with a poison chalice, and he has a very major job to do to repair and mend fences between the two sides, because this state of affairs cannot persist, because it is adversely impacting on national security as well as the confidence of the country.
Ambassador K.C. Singh, this isn't the first time, though, is it, that there has been this friction between both sides? Has it been this bad, in your view?
Look, in the past, whenever it has happened, it's not a combination of factors involving chiefs, standoff on personal issues which had already embittered the environment. I had said right in the beginning on these programs when he went to Supreme Court that he has backed himself into a corner. Either he would come out winning and the government will be sulking, and I believe the defense minister told the government that if the chief wins, he will put in his papers, and if the chief loses, he will retain him. That is, of course, the way Mr. Antony saw it. But essentially, it had already reached that point, because within the cabinet, there was a division. One part was saying that let's settle with him and let's get it over with and let's not drag it on. But Mr. Antony said, now that he has gone to the Supreme Court, and I have it on authority, let us go ahead with it. And if I am wrong and the defense minister is wrong, I'll put in my papers. Now, if that is how it stood in January, then essentially that is those circumstances must be taken into account. However much we try covering it up, however much we try, then you see the steps the chief has taken. Persistence is one thing, stubbornness is another. Now he loses in Supreme Court, he comes out, he is made to withdraw the case, and he puts a spin on it and says a final determination has not been made. Then he has his daughter write a piece in the Outlook magazine, unheard of. Her husband is a serving officer in the army, to write a piece critical of some previous chiefs. It's just not done. Now we are seeing that there was a certain stubbornness in going on with it and not settling it, not moving on, not going back and saying, okay, this issue has been taken to the highest court, we've come to a certain determination, let's go ahead. The government themselves, I think the way they advanced the announcement of Bikram Singh as the next chief, were again indicating trust deficit. It's normally done 2 months in advance. This was done more than 3 months in advance. What is the signal the government is sending? If there is no trust deficit, why do you announce a chief?
So you wouldn't be in any hurry to dismiss this story?
No, I am saying that facts, basic facts, I agree with Rahul. There was no need for Shekhar to have made it like Indo-Pakistan war. You normally do not give a banner headline unless Prime Minister Nehru dies, Indo-Pak war is there, something really, even 26/11, maybe 26/11. Something of that nature deserves it. But a 2-month-old story where interpretation, facts, larger circumstances come into play. Therefore, you can have interpretation which can go from, as General Shankar Prasad said, simple exercise which was mistaken, but then question arise. Why was it terminated? Why was it not allowed to go ahead? Why was the defense secretary recalled? They said, no, he came back because of the case. So
you feel it raises legitimate questions, but let me just bring in Tavleen Singh very quickly on this because, you know, Tavleen writes a column for the Indian Express as well. And Tavleen, I saw you tweeting earlier today because there was such a raging debate on the way the story was presented in the paper today. Do you think that people have misunderstood what the paper was trying to convey, that it was legitimate for it to have been the banner headline, that is, it was full front page? You can wear your journalist hat and tell us.
I can't hear you very clearly, so I may be answering the wrong question because I'm only hearing the debate in bits and pieces. But what I would like to say is that I don't think it's for you or me or Casey or anyone to decide how the editor of the Indian Express should play a story. I thought that the story was very carefully written. There was no implication of a coup. What it was trying to say is that the breakdown in communication between the defense minister and the army chief is so serious that we need to sit up and take notice. And to tell you the truth, me as an ordinary citizen of this country, I think that the army chief should have been sacked along with the defense minister once all this age problem started, especially when he went to the Supreme Court. And then that interview, do you remember Stanley McChrystal in Afghanistan? He gave one interview to Rolling Stone and that was it. He was out. And I think that the country could have been spared a lot of nonsense if that had happened. It's very worrying to see that the government seems unable to act even in a very serious matter like this.
Isn't that a valid point, General Ravi Arora? Do you think that looking forward, I mean, this was a solution that actually there's been a problem on both sides. If the army chief is being blamed on one hand for taking certain unprecedented steps, the way the defense minister has handled that has also been extremely poor from the beginning.
But I think the government is also looking at how the armed forces and particularly the officers are looking at it. Many are backing the chief. At the lowest levels, at the youngsters level, they couldn't be concerned. But at the middle and higher levels, there's a groundswell of support for what the chief has done. Yes, it has damaged the reputations of the very senior officers because there are a number of generals involved in this controversy. But overall, I think it would have led to some more problems if General V.K. Singh was sacked. Whether Mr. Antony went or not is another matter. But on the question of mistrust, I would not be speaking the truth if I said there is no mistrust. I could say there is no love lost between the military and the bureaucracy since long. But what has happened in the last 3-4 months has definitely led to more of mistrust.
General Shankar Prasad, you know, I think overwhelmingly the panel believes that there is a certain degree of mistrust. How long do you think it will take to overcome the after effects of this? General Singh has to step down next month. What is the long-term impact of this entire mess going to be on the army and on our armed forces establishment?
Nidhi, first of all, I don't like this word mistrust or trust deficit. I've been using it myself in the past, but I today want to take a decision that this is not a good word. There have been a lot of differences of opinion between the civilian bureaucracy in the Ministry of Defence and the Armed Forces headquarters on many issues, and the Armed Forces officers are quite peeved about it. The responsibility for defence of India is not only with the Armed Forces headquarters, it is also equally, if not more, with the Ministry of Defence. Why is the army today not fully equipped is more the responsibility of the Ministry of Defence than of the service headquarters. Why modernization has lagged behind, the answer must be given by the political masters, not by the Ministry of Defence and not by the bureaucracy and not by the service chiefs. So this trust deficit, we better keep it aside and say there is lack of synergy between understanding of military matters and furthering them. Unfortunately, the bureaucracy that comes into the Ministry of Defence without any background, without any knowledge of how military works, comes and sits there for 2-3 years, retards everything and goes away without getting anything done. As a result, a very professional armed forces get no support from the bureaucracy, thus the politicians are unable to take decisions and we suffer. The answer is that there has to be an integrated Ministry of Defence where service officers also participate in progress and decision making in the Ministry of Defence. Such a requirement was understood at the time of Kargil operations and post-Kargil report. We wanted to have, the government of India wanted to have an integrated Ministry of Defence, which unfortunately the political masters and the bureaucracy have not been able to achieve. They've only changed the name. Please, if we can have an integrated headquarters of the Ministry of Defence, over the years, over some time, this so-called trust deficit will disappear and the two will work in synergy. The responsibility is equal. Responsibility of the government of India, of the Ministry of Defence is far more than the defence services alone. Defence services have come out creditably
is General Prasad being overly optimistic here? I mean, is this far more serious? Is he does he want to read the glass as half full?
Let me quickly go back to what Tavleen said. As you know, I've been maintaining it for long that they should have just cauterized it in January itself and sent both the Defence Minister and the Army Chief home. But there was no will in the system. He had, as General here is saying, he did not have any aura at that stage of great support in the army. At that stage, he's only fighting for his date of birth. He's generated that support, number one, by going after General Tajinder Singh and the Tetra issue, and number two, writing a letter to the Prime Minister, and then it's surfacing in the public and saying, I'm doing it for the army. Till then, in the public domain, there was nothing. We're seen as fighting for general causes of the army rather than his own cause. I mean, that's number one. Number two is this has embittered the whole thing so much that there'll be more checks and balances. The next chief comes in and they will tighten it up so much because the political system is not going to devise a new system of co-opting the army. I think it's going to be more distrust control, distrust control or distrust remedial, not remedial action, but rather containment of the army. What Rydell says about Pakistan Army, I think the Indian probably Prime Minister and Zardari can discuss that on how to contain their respective armies. Can you imagine something which we used to say Pakistan is concerned with is an issue which has been on the front pages for the last 4 months. What are we dealing with?
Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, what do you think is the way forward from here? When you look at the long-term repercussions for this, how do you think that this delicate relationship can be restored?
Nidhi, first a caveat at the very outset. Our very esteemed panelists have got their right to take a position. But let us not take this very respectful debate of left, right and centre as an army chief bashing or an MOD bashing. I am sorry to say that will not be the right approach of looking at it. Yes, there is a distrust. We have to restore it. Now let me give you certain suggestions. We know that this was already on the internet portal in January itself. I think now I would have expected the Prime Minister to call the top leaders of the opposition, have a frank one-to-one, and let the matter would have been allowed to rest. this controversy would not have simmered. That is how you ensure by governance that these problems do not become cancerous. Perhaps had this decision taken, I'm giving you a very out-of-box solution, all these stories would have been irrelevant. They have been briefed adequately by the government, if it was a routine movement as the case is made out. Now you ask me what is to be done. History gives us the experience of General Thimaiya, who was very shabbily treated by Mr. Krishna Menon. He resigned, you know that. Ultimately, Prime Minister Nehru called him. In a gentle way, had to snub Mr. Krishna Menon with great difficulty. He was also his blue-eyed boy. And Thimaiya was assured of all his reputation and integrity. We need to trust the armed forces, Nidhi. Who dies for the country? None of us. The armed forces who secure us. And at least that entitles them to have the consideration, respect and trust. Therefore, I deliberately used the word equilibrium has to be restored. Now, what is the way forward? The way forward is reaching out, reciprocity, trust. I am sure the professionalism of Indian Army tells us that they accept without condition the civilian political leadership of India. That's what our democracy is about. All this apprehension about what is happening in Pakistan, what Casey said, sorry, that comparison is completely misplaced. We are proud of our democracy and we are proud of the professionalism of our army.
Okay, Mr. Casey Singh wanted to quickly respond to you.
Sure. Mr. Prasad, it's very easy to be sanctimonious when being in the opposition. Why did you bash a naval chief when you had the government?
He's talking about Admiral Vishnu Bhagwat.
All right, no, since he has asked me, I did not want to join issue.
No, why did you?
Since you have asked me,
why did you bash a naval chief? Very simple question. He was holding as exalted an office as the present chief.
Nidhi, I was a minister then. I don't want to join public issue on a sensitive issue, but I can only say, in case of Mr. Bhagwat, there was overwhelming materials available of defying civilian leadership. Beyond this, I have nothing more to say.
Okay.
And Casey, I will remind you again, I have enough material to talk about on this sensitive issue. Let's have some restraint.
All right, let me get last comment. Rahul Bedi, what's the way forward? Do you agree with Casey Singh that going forward from here, the civil-military relationship will actually see deeper mistrust building into it? Or do you think that there can be a way out, and what can that be?
Well, I think that, I'm a little tired over the past week. While this controversy has been raging, I'm a little tired of listening to this tu meh, going back to Admiral Bhagwat, going back to General Thimaiya. I think General Singh is going to be gone in another few weeks. Mr. Antony may remain minister or may not remain minister. I think we should look at it a little more constructively. As the General said, I think one of the ways forward is to integrate the service headquarters with the Ministry of Defence. And I think what is really important is to de-bureaucratize the Ministry of Defence and give military people a little more responsibility and a little more trust. And I think even if the General doesn't like it, there is a trust deficit that has built up, and I think we should be a little more constructive. One of your panelists talked about General Stanley McChrystal. I think when General McChrystal was sacked, there was an informed debate as to how to go forward, not look backwards on the various pitfalls that the American military had fallen into. And that's exactly what we are doing. We're doing this tu meh, we're squeezing a lemon that has no juice left in it anymore. Whether Singh's age was an issue or not, it's over and done with. I think we should go forward, and I think that is the constructive way to do that. And I think one of the major things to be done is to de-bureaucratize the Ministry of Defence, which is so top-heavy with generalists, that I think it cannot move forward if it goes on in this manner.
Okay, Tavleen, you wanted to respond to that before I take last comments from General Ravi Arora.
Yeah, there was no debate before Stanley McChrystal was sacked. He gave an interview to Rolling Stone. As soon as it hit the streets, the general was asked to leave, and he was a very good general and was doing quite well in Afghanistan. I think that actually everyone's behaved disgracefully in the whole thing, and they've put their own interests, all the players in this game, I don't want to name anyone, have put their own interests above that of the country. And, it just horrifies me to think of how an ordinary Indian views what's going on. And, our enemy countries must be having the time of their lives. They must, every bit of dirty linen between the Defence Ministry and the Army is out in the open. Now, this is disgraceful behavior.
General Ravi Arora, last comments.
I think when such a situation develops in any organization, everybody must be changed. And what we need now is a defence minister with a defense background, like we had Mr. Jaswant Singh or KP Singh Deo earlier, that will be very soothing for the time being.
All right. Well, that's an interesting note to end on and an interesting suggestion as well. Let's see how this controversy plays out, because clearly this story, which we thought had ended a few days ago, and we'd even seen public appearances by the defense minister and the army chief on a common platform, this story doesn't seem to be going away yet. Thank you very much to the panel for joining us. Mr. Ravi Prasad, Tavleen Singh and KC Singh will stay with us for a few more minutes. When we come back, we're going to be looking at how India is facing flack on its foreign policy when it comes to Tibet and Myanmar in particular. What should India do? That's after the break. Welcome back. Now, along with much of the rest of the world, India this week congratulated Myanmar's pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi for her party's big win in the country's historic by-polls. But Aung San Suu Kyi was candid in her assessment of India's role. India, she said, needs to do more as the world's largest democracy. And that really has been at the heart of a debate on India's foreign policy. From Myanmar to Tibet, India has often been criticized for compromising on its principles for realpolitik. Anchal has the story.
We always expect more and more and more from India. India is the largest democracy in the world.
Aung San Suu Kyi, an international icon for democratic freedoms. Her message to India, read by many as a disturbing reminder of the shift in India's policy towards its eastern neighbor Myanmar, which for decades has been one of the world's most closed and oppressive military regimes. To others, the decision is simply realpolitik, driven by the evolution of India's regional superpower status and Delhi's efforts to counter China's growing influence among India's immediate neighbors. Not to mention access to Myanmar's vast natural gas reserves. But engagement with the junta increasingly isolated the average Burmese. Disappointment isn't easy to hide. If Myanmar's refugees see India's engagement with the junta as disappointing, Tibetan refugees in Delhi find themselves getting angrier, with Delhi's often heavy-handed means of stopping their protests for an independent Tibet. Yashi, a 26-year-old student, immolated himself on the eve of Chinese President Hu Jintao's visit to India.
But this time we were saddened by the decision of government of India, which allowed China to dictate.
While no policy can be totally devoid of principle, it has to be balanced by considerations of national interest, and it has to be a mixture of principle and pragmatism.
A Tibetan government with a Tibetan Prime Minister in exile live in Dharamshala is no secret. But critics say India only provides as much support to Tibet as it needs to use as a leverage tool against China. The world is demanding more. But on the other side, India is surrounded by a hostile neighborhood and has its own security concerns and feels foreign policy must protect national interest. The challenge for India is the balancing act. In New Delhi, Ravi Arora, NDTV.
So should India's foreign policy be based on principles or pragmatism, or does it have to be either or? Do tell us what you think. Joining us for this particular segment, exiled Burmese leader Tin Sway, who's been in India actually for a very, very long time, many years now. And from the Students for a Free Tibet, we have Dorji Setsen, who also joins us tonight. Before I come to the two of you, I want to go to Tavleen Singh first, because Tavleen, you actually tweeted about this. You were rather angry with the way the Indian government handled the Tibetan protests that took place when China's president was here.
Yes, you know, you were talking about whether we should choose between principles and pragmatism and all this sort of thing. It isn't about that. It's about what India stands for. Is India a democracy? Are we proud of being a democracy? I think we are. In which case, we are the opposite of China. And we must not, at any stage, start behaving like China. So, you know, I mean, if the Chinese Prime Minister didn't like Tibetans protesting against him in the streets of Delhi, what's our problem? You know, Tibetans had every right to protest, and I was ashamed to see the way that the police dealt with them. But, you know, it's routine. We're never on the side of democracy. We have no idea who we are. It is in our national interest to stand up for democracy.
Mr. KC Singh, you're the foreign policy expert on the panel.
You see, this battle between power and what Brzezinski's book is Power and Principle, between realpolitik and moral principles, is always there in every foreign policy. And the greater the power, probably the less attention they pay to morality. It's a stick you beat those who are opposed to you with. Even the US has never applied this uniformly. But I think the mix is changing. The mix that we had during the non-aligned phase was different, because we were with a group of countries, many of them didn't follow those principles. You didn't want to preach that. Soviet Union, one of our biggest supporters, was not democratic. Then we come now to the 21st century. I think today we are in a period when it's a very bad time for dictators. Generally, they're having a tough time all over the world, although what succeeds them may not necessarily be democracy. What follows in Syria or what follows in Libya or in Egypt may be another kind of autocratic control.
Look at the way, you could see those horrible pictures of the way the Tibetan protesters were dealt with.
Now we'll come to the Tibetan issue. Now Tibetan issue is a very specific one. Now let's say Aung San Suu Kyi. Myanmar, I think till now the policy was fine. Till now, because we used a policy of engaging them, and at the same time we didn't want to offend the military junta because they had many other things that we needed them for, particularly in the northeast, cooperation in dealing with the militants there and so on and so forth. All that has changed. Today we have to deal with Myanmar differently. Today we have to, as Tavleen says, we are the two voices in Asia. The Chinese voice, economically very successful, but politically with a very dubious model. India, politically vibrant, I will not say yet fully successful, vibrant, but economically we are still lagging behind. Now these are the two models. The models are not coming from the West. These are the models the Asian countries on a periphery, on China's periphery, are looking at. Therefore, we have to start behaving, articulating, acting differently, and hence in Sri Lanka.
So in Sri Lanka we did it because a government ally forced the government
You're
to
right,
take
for the wrong reasons, right decision for the wrong reasons.
Exactly. Yeah. Have you been disappointed all these years?
I'm always undiplomatic when it comes to India's policy.
You're not diplomatic?
Yeah. So I will be frank, you know. I agree that India should not follow West. Why not following China? The more largest democracy's policy towards Burma is the same as that of China. Soft loans, sale of arms, protecting diplomatic arenas on the war by India. So I think India should do differently, not like China.
India shouldn't be like China.
Should not be like China. So that's why Aung San Suu Kyi has been appealing repeatedly, India, please do more, please do more, please do be proactive to support of democracy. With the changes in Burma over the last couple of days, I think India, this is the right time for India to make a new change, new approaches and new policy towards Burma. So Aung San Suu Kyi and the people of Burma will be happy about that. Right now, the sentiment of the people, Burmese people, towards China and India the same, but it should be changed right now. Yes.
But Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, does it bother you that there are these comparisons that are now being made between India and China, not just about the way it handles Tibetan protests, but in other aspects as well? I mean, do you think that Indian foreign policy is confused?
Well, a lot can be said about India's foreign policy and the way it is being managed, and also the way the political leadership of the foreign ministry is conducting itself. Let's leave it separately for a separate debate, Nidhi. But yes, on a first principles, pragmatism and principles will be there in the pursuit of foreign policy, including national interest. But you cannot divorce principles altogether, more particularly if it is a case of India. Now let me give a very specific instance. Mr. Hu Jintao has a problem with the Tibetan protesters, but India is a democracy. And let me give an analogy. When President Bush came to Delhi in the wake of Iraq war, you must have seen the kind of protest he had to suffer. People even tried to assault his portrait by chappals, right in Delhi, which I saw myself.
And the left side
the government of India did not come down, and the government of India did not come so heavily on them. Then why this kind of behavior with Tibetan refugees? Why? That is, we also raised it in our own way inside the parliament. Therefore, a message has to go that if a foreign guest comes, certainly he would have his own preferences. But as far as India is concerned, the right to protest is recognized and respected, obviously in a non-violent way. As far as Myanmar is concerned, I think the point is very well taken. As Casey said, we have our own strategic interest because of Northeast militancy problem. But when today democracy is dawning in Myanmar, we have to respect, and I have always felt very clearly that government of India in the past also ought to have conveyed its own concern to the treatment being meted out to Aung San Suu Kyi.
You don't think they did that strongly enough? You don't think they did that strongly enough? Because that is a big criticism against India, that India hasn't strongly supported the democracy movement there.
I think I share it, Nidhi. I was present inside the Central Hall when President Obama, in his very stunning speech, exhorted India to take up the cause of democracy in Myanmar. I can understand the compulsions of realpolitik, but within the ambit of that, you can certainly raise the issues of a great denial, deprivation of human rights of the great leader of Myanmar. I think there we ought to have been a little more proactive.
Dorji, do you understand the dilemmas that India faces when the Chinese president... You understand that the India-China relationship is delicate and it's complicated. But are you able to understand why India has acted the way that it has with protesters?
See, Tibetans this time we are saddened by the decision of Indian government putting so down with the protester. What did you expect from the Tibetans when inside Tibet, till now, 33 Tibetans self-immolated? There were protests, thousands of people come to the street and they protest and they were faced gunshot. Many were killed. And these kind of protests which we are doing in India, if it does in Tibet, they may go to prison, they may die. And then the man is coming, Hu Jintao, who is directly responsible, who is the architect of the human rights violation inside Tibet. If we don't protest, what we will do? And we know that we are in India. We are not in China, we are not in Tibet. Tibetans have looked forward India, always Indian support. And we believe what we are doing is nothing different than what India did during Gandhi led the freedom struggle. We are struggling for our freedom. If India don't support, then who will support us? We are saddened by the India's decision now.
Is that easier said than done when you're dealing with a country like China?
It's a matter of balancing it. I think on balance they took this decision, but if you ask me, that one image of self-immolation which occurred in Delhi, that went beyond whatever else that could have been done through protests. That's been seen all over the world. That's been seen in newspapers, in magazines and so on and so forth. The single image has been seen. But I agree with Mr. Prasad, I agree with them. I think the balance was a bit too much tilted in favor of China. Because this gave too much of a breathing space to China. They are suffering a lot of moral, in the moral debate. They are losing out on the self-immolations which are taking place. But I suspect the Indian concern might have been that if you allow it to happen openly, there may be more immolations. I think their concern may have been that. And that is something you can't control. If there is a large mob, if the Chinese cannot control it, how can the Indian police control immolations? That would have been a concern.
Yes, you wanted to say something.
See, the BRIC conference happened in Delhi. We see now India as a developing country and as growing power. When in the BRIC, when the Syria, Iran, Middle East issue was discussed, we hope that Tibet issue will come up, but it didn't happen. So in that case, we feel that something happened just across the nation, Tibet. India is trying to see that it hides its eyes. So which is sad for us. And we now think that, as we know that there is a growing support, the Indian people always support, but from the government side, we need a strong support, especially now people are dying. India's support need to save those Tibetans who are dying inside. And Gandhi, when he said, do or die, for the Tibetans now it's a situation of do or die, and India should now step forward and condemn China and break down the military which is inside Tibetan area.
Well, I don't think India is going to do that, but I think what you made is an important point about India perhaps standing up more strongly for the democratic principles that it stands for. And like A.C. Singh said, well, we tried to do that in the case of Sri Lanka, but for the wrong reasons. We were pushed to do it because of the DMK, but we did it nevertheless. Thank you very much to the entire panel for joining us on the program tonight. I wish we had more time for this particular debate. Thank you very much.